Alabama's governor, Ivey, has ordered a pause on statewide executions after a number of gruesome and botched lethal injections led to outrage and backlash. Now, we hear, at least I think we both agree, that injections, period, make no sense. I'm very much against the death penalty and also very much against cruel and unusual punishment. And there's quite a bit of evidence indicating that these botched lethal injections and lethal injections that don't end up getting botched are pretty cruel and inhumane. I'll explain why in just a moment. Now, the governor asked the Alabama Attorney General, Steve Marshall, to withdraw the state's 2 pending motions in the state of Alabama, okay? And they were supposed to set execution dates for Alan Eugene Miller and James Edward Barber. That has now been paused effectively because they want to review the lethal injections process. Alan Miller, by the way, was set to be executed on September 22nd, but survived after prison workers couldn't find a vein to start the intravenous line needed for the 3-drug lethal injection cocktail before the death warrant expired at midnight. Kenneth Eugene Smith, who was set to die on November 17th, experienced a similar situation and also survived after officials couldn't start an IV. Now, the way lethal injection executions are done is there are 3 injections. One basically puts the person to sleep. The second one is supposed to numb their entire body so they don't feel pain. And then the third injection is the actual lethal injection that stops their heart. But the person who came up with this 3-drug cocktail has admitted on record that he had a hunch that this method would work without a hitch and didn't really know for sure whether or not the person being executed could feel pain. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2, of course, is when you read the details of these botched executions, it is very clearly cruel and unusual punishment. And so the governor's office said this in Alabama, of course, working in conjunction with Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner John Hamm, Governor Ivey is asking that the Department of Corrections undertake a top to bottom review of the state's execution process and how to ensure the state can successfully deliver justice going forward. Ivey also asked Alabama's AG's office to not seek additional execution dates for any other Alabama death row inmate until the review is complete. No timeline was provided. Now, in the next video, you're gonna hear about another botched execution, this time in Oklahoma. And I think it's important to watch this to kind of understand just how cruel this process really is. Let's watch.
John Marion Grant waited to be killed. Executioners strapped him to the gurney, then they injected him with a sedative. John was being executed by lethal injection. It's supposed to be the humane, less cruel way to die, but John began to vomit and shake. It went on for around 15 minutes before he was declared dead. It had been violent and likely painful. Before the state killed Grant, Oklahoma hadn't executed anyone in 6 years after a string of botched killings. And in many autopsies across the US, examiners found the prisoner's lungs were filled with fluid.
The death here is more akin to death by drowning, where a person's lungs fill with fluid and they choke and they may have awareness of this, and that's how they die. They die of suffocation.
Now, keep in mind that through organizations like the Innocence Project, we've also learned that many death row inmates were exonerated using DNA evidence, clearing them of any wrongdoing. So we have definitely executed people who were innocent. The other thing to keep in mind is the racial bias that plays a role in these sentences. So if you look at crimes, similar crimes committed by Black suspects or Black individuals who've been convicted of the crime and white people who've been convicted of like the same crime, clearly you could see it in the data, Black people get the death sentence far more often. So there's the racial bias component of it, there's the inaccurate convictions, wrongful convictions, and then there's the cruel and unusual punishment. Executions make no sense in this country, they just don't.
Yeah, so look, I'm not philosophically opposed to the death penalty. I'm sure a lot of you are, and that probably makes you a better person than I am. Having said that, I'm now completely and utterly against the death penalty. Why? Two main reasons. One is, when I was a kid, I thought that the government was competent. Boy, I've been disabused of that in many ways. And as you see, Alabama struggled in September and November of the year 2022. They're like, we can't find a vein. What was I thinking? I mean, I was a kid, right? But it was stretched into my adulthood. And so you look at them and you go, these yokels are gonna figure out how to humanely kill someone? No way, no way. Of course they're gonna botch it. That's why you see story after story of them botching it royally, almost. And now it seems like they botch it in more cases than they executed properly.
Yeah, no, 100%. And in fact, in some states where they still have other execution methods, whether it be, believe it or not, the execution chair still exists.
Yep.
So in some states they have that, and then they also have death by firing squad.
Yeah, I think that's Utah.
And guess what? In some of these cases, the inmate will choose death by firing squad, or in some cases even gas chamber, over going with a lethal injection.
Gas chamber, really, guys?
I know.
We line up a guy against, and then there's the guys, we line them up against the wall and then we shoot them in the head, right? And then the electric chair, we literally fry them to death. No, this is crazy. We can't do that, okay? There is, rightly or wrongly, fortunately or unfortunately, there is no humane way to kill a person. Okay, so then the second part that I was wrong about is, it turns out a lot of them are innocent. On average, 4% of the people on death row are innocent. Well, does that add up to a lot of people? Yes. Since 1973, 190 people on death row were exonerated. Turns out they were innocent and we were gonna murder them.
It's crazy
and that's
awful.
No, on that alone, even if ideologically you like the death penalty, you can't like the death penalty killing innocent people. That's nuts.
Now, we just heard about the botched lethal injections and the cruel and unusual punishment associated with it. But while I agree with Governor Ivey's decision to pause on executions until further review, I do not agree with her placing the blame on the inmates here.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so let's get to that statement. For the sake of the victims and their families, we've got to get this right. I don't buy for a second the narrative being pushed by activists that these issues are the fault of the folks at corrections or anyone in law enforcement for that matter. I believe that legal tactics and criminals hijacking the system are at play here. What are you talking about? So the inmates who are about to suffer cruel and unusual punishment with botched lethal injections, they did it, they wanted that. They wanted water, fluid in their lungs. They wanted to feel like they were drowning to death. That's what they wanted, Ivey. Like she's a governor of a state in this country. She's a governor.
Yeah.
Okay, the big dog, the top dog in the state of Alabama. She said that.
So criminals hijacking the system that you're running. How do they hijack it? They're strapped in and you're the one trying to find a vein to kill them. And somehow that one's on them.
It's crazy.
That just doesn't make any sense at all. But like that's just a thing that Republicans do now. They put out statements that don't make any sense because they realize their followers don't care. They're like, just kill, 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 right? And it doesn't, you think Republican voters in Alabama care that it's botched and it's gonna be incredibly painful and they might accidentally be killing the wrong black guy? If they care, they haven't shown that they've cared. They've got a curious way of exhibiting that. Right now, they're saying full steam ahead.